Today I'm at the Holy Trinity Church, Low Moor, Bradford, and this is the burial ground attached to the church. Now I'm going to take you back to Wednesday 15th of January 1896, where a freak accident occurred, and as a result there were a few fatalities. Now this is the reason why I'm here at the burial ground. It's quite a large burial ground. It goes all the way back there and the church is across there. But I often wonder, as I walk through these cemeteries and burial grounds, all the history that's been lost, misplaced, forgotten and unmarked. But today we're going to bring you a story, a tragic story that Mark will take you through.
I wonder how many people have passed this corner on the way to Low Moor without realising what this fine old building behind us actually was. Well, I can tell you it was a school, and it was called Newark School, which opened in 1869 and it closed in 1917. It was a Church of England school, and it was also used in 1916 as a mortuary for victims of the Low Moor explosion. But this isn't the school we're going to be focusing on today. The school that we're going to be looking at is elsewhere in Low Moor, and we'll go there now. When I said we were going to take you to a school, there was an element of truth in that, because the school itself is long gone. We're currently stood on the grounds of what was Nook School, and there are a few surviving elements. You can see there the school wall, and if you pan to this side, there's still a surviving building which appears to be very much in the style of the school's architecture. I think that might have been a caretaker's house or something. Like most schools at that time, it was basically just one huge classroom, but there was a small cloakroom that was utilised as a smaller teaching room for the baby class, pupils aged about 3 or 4, and it was in that small cloakroom stroke classroom that a terrible tragedy occurred on the afternoon of Wednesday the 15th of January 1896. We have in the past covered a couple of stories where the wind had been involved with causing the death of local children, and that was also the case on that Wednesday afternoon here in Low Moor. To set the scene, it was 2:30 in the afternoon, and in the small cloakroom classroom there was a class full of 3-year-olds, and they were all huddled more or less round the fire in that room because it was very, very cold and they were doing their schoolwork. And in the larger classroom, the headmistress was in there, and she noticed that smoke had come down the chimney and billowed into the classroom as a result of the winds, obviously. So she went to the small cloakroom classroom to see if that was happening in there, and the teacher who was teaching the small children says, "No, everything's fine in here." And no sooner had the headmistress turned to leave the small classroom, she heard an almighty crash. What follows here are the words of the teacher, Miss Margaret Inglis. She said, "It was the chimney that had fallen in. It made a big hole in the roof, and the debris fell through this into the room. I was standing some distance away, but the children were just under when the chimney fell. I got 2 of them in my arms and ran out with them. 4 got out altogether, and the others were injured." There was about a dozen kids in that little classroom, and as the teacher said, 4 of them got out, but 8 were trapped inside. There was a rescue attempt, and they did manage to get the children out, but however, there was 3 of them with very severe injuries. One of the injured children was called Charles Parrott. He was 3 years and 9 months, and he was taken from the school. He had very severe head injuries, and he was carried down here towards Low Moor Station, which is just down that way behind you, but sadly he died en route. A message had been sent to the town hall asking for horse ambulances to be waiting at the exchange station, because the injured were going to be transported from Low Moor Station to the centre of Bradford, and then the injured children were going to be taken to the old infirmary on Westgate. Only 2 children made that journey to the infirmary. One of the injured children was called Fred Booth, and he was 3 years old, and he actually survived after suffering a fractured skull. And that's perhaps the most merciful thing that could have happened as a result of this tragedy, because only a fortnight before, his parents had buried one of their other sons who had died. Behind me is the George Hotel, and this pub was the venue for the inquest into the death of 𝗬𝗙𝗘𝗖𝗏 a few days after the disaster. And a verdict was reached of accidental death. During the inquest, the coroner questioned Miss Inglis, the teacher of the baby class. The coroner asked, "Did you suspect anything was wrong with the chimney?" And the teacher said, "Not in the slightest degree." "It didn't give you any warning?" "No," she said. "And you had no reason to believe that the chimney was unsafe at all?" "No, everything happened as suddenly as possible." The structural condition of the chimney was also addressed during the inquest, and everybody was completely satisfied that there was no defects and the whole thing had just been a terrible accident. Can you hear that? Children playing happily in a playground. That's quite sad, bearing in mind the story that we're covering here. Okay, anyway, the second child that was taken to the infirmary was 𝗤𝗙𝗔𝗔𝗡𝗏. He was 3 years old and 11 months, but sadly, he succumbed to his injuries the following morning and he died in the hospital. And like 𝗬𝗙𝗘𝗖𝗏, he died of severe head injuries. Both of those boys are buried here at the Holy Trinity Church. Viewers will be aware of the fact that we do like to take them to the gravesite of the victims that we cover in these stories. But in the case of 𝗬𝗙𝗘𝗖𝗏, we have a bit of a problem because there doesn't appear to be any record or reference as to where he's buried within this churchyard. The main issue seems to be the fact that a huge car park now occupies this part of the graveyard. It's very, very possible that 𝗬𝗙𝗘𝗖𝗏 lies beneath the tarmac. However, in the case of 𝗤𝗙𝗔𝗡𝗏, the second child who died as a result of the tragedy, we have been able to locate his grave. We'll take you there now. And here is the final resting place of 𝗤𝗙𝗔𝗡𝗏, aged 3 years and 11 months. He's buried here with family members. There's John Eastwood. There's Hannah, his wife. And here, also of Alderman, son of Samuel and Marjorie Eastwood. Those are his parents, obviously, and they are actually buried in a separate grave in this churchyard. But today, let's remember the 2 little boys that lost their lives so tragically on that Wednesday afternoon at a school in Low Moor. Charles is in here somewhere, but both of you rest in peace.